Welcome to the show. It's hard enough to make a movie. You have to lift 10,000 boulders up a hill and watch 90% of them fall down, and you have to roll them back up again. It's an enormous combination of heavy lifting and sprinting and marathon. Well, imagine making a movie about Roe v. Wade from the point of view of what really happened, destroying lies with things like the truth. Our guest today, Nick Loeb, did just that thing, and he's our guest today on The Patrick Coffin Show. Don't go away. Nick Loeb parlayed an education in business into the work of producing and acting in Hollywood movies. He co-founded IPC after graduating from Tulane University and is now the co-director and actor in the upcoming movie Roe v. Wade. Nick Loeb, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Patrick, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I should have said the controversial movie Roe v. Wade. When the mainstream media want to slag and quarantine and shame something, they call it controversial. I got a little problem, Nick, because there's so many ways to get into the conversation, and I decided just to kind of go back to the beginning and ask you about how the idea for the film got underway. Was this a brainchild of yours, or did you come onto a project that was already kind of begun?
Yeah, no, I mean, it had to do with a conversation with some friends talking about how come no one's made a movie about Roe v. Wade? And I said, well, that's not something I'd be interested in. I have no interest in making a pro-choice movie.
Right.
And they said, well, what do you mean a pro-choice movie? And then they started to tell me little tidbits about the history that I didn't know. I mean, everybody in America has heard of Roe v. Wade. A lot of people know it's the decision that led to legalize abortion. But that's about all Americans know about it. Mm-hmm. And that's all I know about it. And the more that I read about it, learned about it, I found that it was really a fascinating story, almost in the, I don't know if you've ever seen JFK with Oliver Stone?
Yeah, mm-hmm, yes.
It was sort of a very conspiratorial, suspenseful type story of how it got there, with conspiracy and manipulation and it's the amount of characters involved in the process, and not only how it got decided, but really how it even got there. Mm-hmm. I said, well, this would make a fantastic drama. It's something that everyone's heard of, like JFK, but no one really knows the ins and outs of it. And so that got me to read about 40 books in the project, all the court transcripts, letters between the justices, speeches, and write the script.
I have not seen the film yet, obviously, but I did see one of the trailers. It's one thing that struck me about the trailer, Nick, is the art design, how you evoked not just obviously the picture cars and that era, but the look of it. It has a Super 8, almost family memory feel to it. Very early 70s. So just kudos for the, what's the fancy word? Verisimilitude. It looks like you've snapshotted back then, but you've also made parallels to today's situation with the Brett Kavanaugh Senate hearings, the confirmation hearings, which really the back burner of jet fuel was concern over Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, I think we did that in the teaser. The film doesn't really show anything that has to do with present day. It was really to incite the audience. A lot of people don't know that Roe v. Wade was actually heard twice in 1971 and then re-argued in 1972. And the reason it was re-argued because it was initially 7 justices. The Chief Justice wanted to wait to re-argue until Nixon appointed 2 new justices, hoping to overturn the decision the first time. And we parallel it today. Roe v. Wade may be heard again, and with new justices, may be overturned. And so it was something really just to incite the audience of what may happen.
Well, a lot of people, they think of Roe v. Wade, if they're of a certain age, as some distant past thing. They may have read about it in a history book or seen it appear in a book or in a talk. But in 1973, people have to understand that the country was also divided at the time. The Vietnam War had it was finally officially over in 1975, but it was a time of tumult, as today is a time of tumult. For people who have no idea, who was Roe in Roe v. Wade? I want to just get to the title names.
Sure. So Roe was a woman named Norma McCorvey. She was a teenager who had 2 children already. She was from an abusive family, and she had a lot of problems. Poor girl from Texas. And she
And
was seeking. I mean, she was seeking an abortion for her third child, and really the reason she got into the whole case in the first place was because she was promised that if they took this case up, she'd be able to have an abortion.
hmm
Later in life, she became pro-life.
yeah, I remember following her story. I know Father Frank Pavone and some of the other people who came alongside her. She had kind of a multi-stage journey from her life back then to her life before she passed away a few years ago as a pro-lifer, and then she finally embraced the Catholic faith. Now, one of the ironies of the story, Nick, is that as I understand it, Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey, part of the legal team that wanted to overturn the decision, they said that the best way to do that is to say that Norma had been raped. Right?
Well, yes, and so yes and no. They never used that. They never used that in any of the testimonies of the trial that she was raped. It was something that Norma had initially said because she didn't really know how to answer the question when they asked her, "How did you become pregnant in the first place?" And I think she was embarrassed.
Yeah.
And she wanted to use whatever ammunition she could to be able to win. They never, I think it helped maybe incite her lawyers, but her lawyers really were looking for a girl, any girl. It was not about Norma. This was about it was about the lawyers from Planned Parenthood, a guy named Cyril Means and NARAL, who really were scouring the country to find a girl that they could utilize to bring this to the Supreme Court, because they were trying to fight state by state. It was taking forever.
Yeah.
They had just won New York, they had won California. It was once they needed. They were fighting these state legislatures one at a time. They felt if they could get it passed through the Supreme Court, they could win in one fell swoop. So they were looking for a girl, and they were looking for lawyers. And so they found Sarah were lawyers that they found, Sarah and Linda and Norma, and they found them and essentially operated, organized the whole thing. It was Sarah Weddington had never tried a case in her life. She couldn't even get a job.
Was she a law student at the time?
She had just graduated out of UT Law for a couple of years. She was volunteering for a local women's group and local Planned Parenthood at the time. And she was in desperate need of work, and she was working on these issues. And so the head office of Planned Parenthood and NARAL knew that there was this girl in Texas through Sarah and Linda. They had connected through Norma's adoption attorney, a guy named Henry McCluskey. And then the folks from NARAL and Planned Parenthood sort of orchestrated it all and got the best team of lawyers. And essentially, Sarah was just the face of it.
Right.
She was just the face. Linda ended up dropping out halfway through the Supreme Court. After the first Supreme Court trial, Linda sort of didn't want anything more to do with it anymore. And I don't know if later in life, Linda lost her law license for forging documents.
I did not know that. Why did she? First of all, for folks who don't know what NARAL is, the acronym National Abortion Rights Action League. I think it had a previous iteration.
It did. It was the National Association to Repeal Abortion Law.
I see. Yeah.
Back then. Now it's changed. And there was a history of not really looking at documents. Norma had a history of not really reading documents, reading what she signed. Same thing happened with when she dealt with Sarah and Linda. Interestingly, Henry McCluskey, who was the lawyer that sort of orchestrated, Norma and Sarah, and really the only person outside of that group of Planned Parenthood that know that they lied to Norma and manipulated her. 6 months after Roe, he was assassinated.
McCluskey was.
And you know who prosecuted his assassin?
Henry Wade?
That's correct.
I guessed. Wow.
Henry Wade. So you can't get any more Oliver Stone-esque than that.
Yeah, that is strange. That part I did not know. I thought I was impressive in my arcane history knowledge to know that Henry Wade was the guy who prosecuted Jack Ruby, who killed Lee Harvey Oswald. So there's another JFK connection.
Yeah, and Henry Wade, the only case Henry Wade ever lost was Roe in his life.
Wow. He was like the Vince Bugliosi of his time.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Did Linda ever disclose why she dropped out of the proceedings?
I think she talked about it a little bit. I just think she went on to other things and needed to make money. And really, Sarah was the spotlight of it all. And I think Linda kind of shied away and didn't really like and want the spotlight, to be honest. And I think Linda had some, and I don't want to speculate, but I think Linda had some challenging background issues at that time, personal, that she was dealing with. That I don't want to bring up because it's irrelevant and,
sure,
it'll.
Yeah. Another irony occurs to me is that Norma McCorvey, Jane Roe, never had an abortion. Is that true?
Correct. She never had an abortion. And it was interesting. She asked them, if you take this case, will I be able to have an abortion in time? Mm-hmm. And I mean, come on, every lawyer knows that cases take years. And they told her yes. So, I mean, she was really manipulated with the whole thing. But the movie is not really about Norma. Right. Really, the movie is, Norma's only got a handful of scenes in the film because Norma really wasn't part of the case. She was just a tool. Yeah. The movie is really about the pro-life side fighting the pro-choice side. The first two acts of how to get their agenda passed, and then the last act is the Supreme Court when they get there. Mm-hmm.
And the behind-the-scenes discussions among the justices and among advocates for both sides. And that's the central clash of the story.
And I think that's what's the most interesting. I don't think we've ever seen a film. I don't remember ever seeing a film that takes into context the United States Supreme Court. I know we just saw a movie called The Post, but we don't really see any of the discussions in the internal workings of the justices and their discussions, their backroom conversations, their conferences, in anything. And I think today it's so topical with the Supreme Court. We've just had 2 nominations, potentially a third coming in the future. Yeah. And I think the American people, there's sort of an arm's length from what is the Supreme Court, how do they talk, what's going on in the back rooms, and we shed light on that. And we used a lot of books to tell those stories. We used internal letters between the justices to show conversations. I mean, everything we took and we wrote essentially word for word what they said to each other. Mm-hmm.
Let me turn to Bernard Nathanson. Dr. Nathanson very kindly endorsed my book on contraception, and I did one of the last interviews before he passed away in 2011, I think it was. You play him in the film.
I do.
Now, did you read his book, Hand of God? And he's had quite the journey too, from co-founder of NARAL to atheist pro-life documentary and producer, very effective communicator. Then he became a Christian, and he ended up becoming a Catholic. What was it like learning about him and his story? Had you heard anything about him before you started this?
Not a thing. I didn't know one thing about Bernie, as we like to call him.
Bernie, yeah.
And we like to call him Bernie. And I've read all his books. Aborting America. I mean, he wrote, I think, 3 or 4 different books, a lot of different papers, gave a lot of speeches. Mm-hmm. I've listened to every one of his interviews, read every one of his books. We even went out and optioned The Hand of God. And so we really got to learn a lot about Bernie. And then we also read, his best friend. I don't know if you know who his best friend was. It was a guy named Larry Lader.
Larry Lader was the NARAL co-founder?
The founder. Larry essentially was the father of the abortion movement in this country. Without Larry Lader, we would not have had abortions.
That's a chilling way to put it.
It's essentially true. So Larry was mentored by Margaret Sanger.
Oh, okay.
Larry wrote lots of books. His first big book was called Abortion. Then he wrote Abortion 2, and then he's written biographies on Margaret, who he sort of had a strange infatuation with. And he went on to launch NARAL and became friends with Bernie, and he got Bernie to join him and run the medical division and be a co-founder of NARAL. And so Larry writes a lot about Bernard in his books as well. And so and Larry's also played by Jamie Kennedy in our movie.
Oh, okay.
Plays Larry Lader. Mm-hmm. And so Bernie has an interesting ride. Quite a crazy life, starting out from university at McGill in
Yeah,
Canada.
that's
His
my that's
father
my
was an
my
Oxford
my alma
Christian.
mater. Yeah, I went to McGill.
Okay.
Different times. Yeah.
And then he went to medical school. Yeah, graduated from medical school around 1948, 1949. And some of his books. I mean, he's quite a character. I mean, he had 4 wives. He's very funny. He's very outgoing, charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he even writes in one of his books. They used to have a song the obstetricians used to sing at McGill in Canada about abortion.
Back then.
Yes, and the song went, "There's a fortune in abortion."
Wow.
And I'll send you the lyrics. We sing it in the movie.
Love to. We'll put the lyrics in the show notes at patrickcoffin.media. Wow.
and yeah, so I mean, Bernie takes an unusual ride. We follow his whole story. The movie really is Bernie narrates the movie, and it's really the movie is the juxtaposition between Bernie, who is fighting for women's rights, versus Dr. Mildred Jefferson, who is the first African-American woman to graduate Harvard Medical School,
Mm-hmm.
who's fighting for life. And then Bernie has, throughout the story, at the end of the story, he has a conversion. And we even went to shoot it. He was baptized in St. Patrick's later in life. And we went and shot the scene. We were the only movie in history to ever shoot inside St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City.
You're kidding.
Yeah. To be allowed to go in there to shoot. Which we shot several scenes, including Bernie's baptism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, for people who, it's easy to say he co-founded NARAL and he knew later he'd done obstetrics training at McGill, but I remember asking him the estimate of how many abortions he was responsible for. And he said, well, thousands personally, and he thought it was about 85,000. He ran the largest abortion mill in New York, I think the biggest in the country, one of the first wave of abortion mills. And so he just did it so often, made so much money off of it. And then what was the inciting incident of his conversion to the pro-life worldview, Nick?
So it was really technology. I mean, it's a lot, which is interesting because this is what's happening today to our youth. It was new sonogram technology that he saw that came out in literally a year after Roe, which started his process to convert, where he realized he was killing babies when he was able to see through a sonogram an abortion, that he was tearing off arms and legs. And there's, you'll find out throughout the movie, Bernie also was a little bit of a hypocrite. And there's an article he gives in the Washington Post where he contradicts himself later in life. Mm-hmm. And we show that. And so, although he's our hero, he's our flawed hero, just like everybody else.
Right. So
he's flawed not only in all different ways. And so, but that really led to his conversion, the realization that he was killing babies, which has led to really this generation of millennials today. If you take a look at, more than 50% of millennials today are becoming pro-life. And the trend is becoming in our favor. And people say, well, why is that happening? And it's technology. I mean, you can see a baby's heartbeat in the first 3 weeks. I mean, we have access to the internet today. And everybody wants, millennials today always question. They never believe what they hear. And they Google and research and look. And today, if you do that, you can see a little baby. When I grew up, I didn't have access to that. I just thought it was a gob of goo. Yeah. I didn't know there was arms, legs, and a hand and a feet in the first month. So
so many euphemisms get thrown at what an unborn baby is, from POC, right, products of conception, cluster of cells, anything to dehuman the unborn so that the unborn become an instrument to accept or reject according to your whim. Much like language used against blacks before the Dred Scott decision. If you don't want to, crush your enemy, you have to dehumanize the enemy and use all kinds of euphemisms.
Like property.
Right. So children are no longer gifts, they're property. And you can dispense with property, get rid of them.
Like slaves were property.
Right, yeah. Well, the analogy is a good one. Now, this is This is personal for you, Nick. I've read a lot about your candid assessment of your own background, the fight over the embryos with Sofia Vergara, and you fathered two babies that were lost through abortion, and you're one of the 60 million fathers walking around. We never talk about the fathers. We always talk about the mother and the baby, but it takes two to tango. Is your backstory something that you drew on in wanting to get the story right and to tell it from a personal place, not just an abstract or a moral place?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, I think what I cared about most where my story comes out in Roe is really through Bernie, and through Bernie's lack of understanding that he was killing children. No different than when I was in my 20s, and I had no idea. Nobody had told me that there was a baby there. It was just a clump of cells. In the first couple of months,
Yeah.
if you have an abortion, it's okay. At the end of the, that I was a party to, and so I didn't realize that. And then I began, after I had them, it had an effect on me. I think more from a spiritual point of view. And as I got older, I realized that I'd really killed lives. It was painful, and I think if I was educated today, that I wouldn't have gone down that path.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of that is education. It's the same thing with Bernie. He says he didn't know. And then he came, and then he was educated, through new technology, realizing he was killing lives. I mean, even to the point, I don't know if you realize it, but Bernie also aborted his own child.
Yeah, I did know that. Yeah,
which we talk about and we show in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, and which is part of, he essentially kills his own child. And so I think that is where in the film, where my personal story is
Mm-hmm.
Bernard, which sort of gave me the place to go to play him.
Yeah. Did you want to play him as soon as you started researching the story? As it started to take shape, did you think, I want to play Bernie?
Yeah, I mean, originally, to be honest, we had another protagonist. When we first wrote the script, we had a different protagonist in the film. We really took it from it was very one-sided. We had written it was really just a pro-life film with a pro-life lead, and that was it. And as we developed and we researched and we learned, we found it to be more interesting to write it from the pro-choice side, not the pro-life side. And so we changed. Bernie had been a very small character, as the opposition, not as the lead. And we rewrote the movie from where Bernie and Mildred were the leads. It's sort of a balance of pro-life and pro-choice, instead of just making it just about preaching to the choir. And I think that was a very, interesting but flat character that we had originally written.
Yeah.
Based on somebody else, which doesn't really matter. And I think Bernie was much more dynamic, and we follow an arc and a different journey where he starts one place and he ends up at a different place. And I think that will be much more interesting to the audience.
Does the movie get into the one layer out from the center of the target, the way they used the so-called right to privacy from Griswold versus Connecticut? Because that's one of the main fulcrums that they decided, hey, if we're going to allow the sale and distribution of contraception based on this penumbra, this kind of quasi-magical idea of a right to privacy, that was the precedent for Roe v. Wade. Is that
we do talk about it a little bit, so that was really Brennan's idea. So Justice Brennan, played by Robert Davi, was all about let's use Griswold v. Connecticut for this case. He spearheaded that. He does talk about that in a couple scenes.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't get into too much complexities because it's a movie at the end of the day,
right.
And too much court jargon and talk is a little heavy for the audience. But we mentioned it a couple times about the right to privacy in Griswold v. Connecticut.
I wanted to ask you about the resistance that you've had. Was that the end of that? Because
sure.
There's a whole other. We could go into several different meadows just on that alone. But I want to get some guardrails up, and I want to talk about the resistance that you had, location, places saying, "Look, you can't shoot here." Permission that was given was revoked. Cast people below the line, production people quitting. Give us an anecdote or two. of the
Yeah, I
resistance?
think this all started from the very beginning when we started raising money. So we had launched a crowdfunder at RoeVWade.com to raise money for the film, which we are still raising money there. And Facebook blocked us, shut us down. We had to fight with them to get it back up. So starting from there, all the way by going to set, yeah, we had some challenges. I mean, we had a synagogue where we had rented out, we had paid for, we had contracted to house all of our extras and feed all of our cast and crew. At the end of the day, when they found out what the film was about, locked the doors and wouldn't let anybody back in to get any of their belongings. But I tell you, with the resistance between that and maybe 2 or 3 crew members quitting and 2 or 3 actresses backing out. And by the way, this is in a crew of several hundred people, 74 actors. So it's listen, you have ups and downs in all productions. You mentioned on the opening show what a heavy lift it is to get a movie produced. When you're doing a low budget film, our budget was under $10 million. We're not doing a $60 million film. It's always challenging with cast and crew, and to add this topic on top of this. But with the negativity, we got an outpouring of support. I mean, we had thousands of people go to RoeVWade.com and support us. We had people offering free cars. Like you mentioned the picture cars. We had guys offering free picture cars, free locations, free food. Shooting in Louisiana was like a dream because, it's the most right to life state in the union. And we met with the governor and the governor's wife and everyone, even though they're Democrats, they're pro-life, and everybody was very supportive in Louisiana. So it was really a dream to shoot there. I'm a resident there. I went to Tulane University. I'm a volunteer cop there, and I love Louisiana. So for me, being down there also was amazing. And you have your challenges. I know what the media likes to talk about. It got us a lot of great press. A lot of the challenges have come a little more after, and I think these are the bigger ones have been really the attacks by the media, the attacks by the Daily Beast, not only on paper, but the physical attacks, the on-set attacks by the media. It just goes to show how crazy our world's gotten today, that the members of the media literally attacking us physically. And it's crazy.
Well, that's the difference between the two sides on that issue. The people who are pro-life tend overwhelmingly to be peaceful, rational. Look, we think your position's wrong. We're willing to find common ground, debate, argue, have a discussion that's frank and open. But the other side of the issue seems to want to silence and ban, and even to the point of physical altercations. To me, good.
It's amazing that you say this because it sounds BS what you're saying. Yeah. It sounds like it's we're spinning something. But I literally was just there and saw it. I was in D.C. at the March for Life this weekend. I mean, I only thought like 100,000 people would show. I mean, if you look at the videos, it looks like there's millions of people marching. And the majority of it, either older people or high school kids or children. No one's screaming. No one's yelling. Everyone's peaceful. I mean, there are a couple of signs that are a little gruesome, and that was on Friday. And then Saturday, the Women's March, I mean, the signs are F you this, go to hell this, I
get
hope
your
you
rosaries
die
off
that.
my ovaries, all the cliche F-bomb
it's so
protests.
vulgar, and it's so, and they have their like 8-year-old kids and they babies with onesies saying F you Trump. I mean, I don't know who brings up their children like this, but I mean, I didn't believe it till I saw it with my own eyes. And it's just, I mean, this is the world we're coming to.
Well, it's a snapshot. That the two attitudes toward public discourse are revealed when you talk about abortion. It's just the ultimate flashpoint divider of one kind of humanity versus another kind of humanity. And if you add on to that media perceptions, I'm sure the media painted the next day Women's March as more or less the same size.
Yeah, I don't even know. I think last year it was flipped. There was more people in the Women's March, but this year it really wasn't that full, the Women's March. It was maybe a couple 100,000 people. We were leaving, but nothing as close to what the Life March was. And there's a time lapse video that you can see if you want to post on all the martial life views for a minute time lapses, and you literally it's nonstop hundreds of thousands of people for a minute going through. It could be over 1 million.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, if you can shoot that over too, that's a really great visual picture. And
Yeah, it was amazing.
And 99% are young and happy, smiling, right?
Yeah, everyone was young, everyone was happy, everyone was friendly and supportive. It was no screaming bad names. There was no profanity. There was nothing. And it was like the next day, it was like a wave of anger showed up to DC on Saturday.
Now, if you had decided to tell the story from the Planned Parenthood angle on that tale, you would have had a massive influx of corporate cash. You would have had multi-Academy Award-winning actors doing flips and twists to be part of it, right?
You listen, I would have had my film funded in a day for $40 million, and I would have had a deal with Universal Studios. So, but we do tell it from Planned Parenthood's point of view, just the way, not the point of view they're going to like, because we tell the truth. So, but you're right. If we had told a pro-choice story and left out the realities of what they actually did to get their movement through, I think that we would have, had a much easier job.
Tell us a little bit about the reception so far. You've done beta testing. Have audiences seen? I mean, we're recording this.
We haven't. Nobody's.
Good.
We're still in post-production.
Yeah.
We still have 3 months left of color, sound design, music, VFX. We finished a teaser that we launched last week. It was really the first footage anybody has seen of the film.
Yeah.
I'm in shock because I've been in the film business for over 20 years. I've never seen an indie film get over 50 articles from a teaser. I mean, maybe 1 or 2, but not 50. And I mean, we got over 100 articles when we were shooting the film, and no one had seen anything. And so I think the response, positive or negative, have been great. I think from the teaser that we launched, with all the negative press that had come out before about what a disgrace and a disaster we were, I think people have seen the teaser and they're like, wow, this looks like a $30-40 million studio film. They couldn't believe a lot of people may not know the names, but everybody in our generation knows the faces. Yep. So when they see our film and see all the stars they grew up with from the 70s and 80s and 90s, from Steve Guttenberg from Police Academy and John Schneider from Dukes of Hazzard and Robert Davi and Corbin Burnson from LA Law and Jon Voight and Jamie Kennedy from Scream or Joey Lawrence from Blossom.
Stacey Dash.
So excited to see, and Stacey Dash, from Clueless. And everyone's sort of so excited to see this great cast that everyone's familiar with. And there's amazing shots. I mean, we're shooting in DC and New York, and it looks like a big real film. And the color for me was so important. We didn't have $40 million, so working on the color to capture that period was so important to me. Giving that sort of that yellowish little feel of the early 70s that film used to shoot on back then.
Definitely captures that. That's one of the first things I noticed. I've watched a ton of, Scorsese era 70s, kind of that gritty, almost street feel. Yeah, it just reminds me of a Super 8 family, a home movie feel. It's like it's like a memory. I interviewed Milo Yiannopoulos last month, and someone else asked me to settle a rumor. Does Milo have a cameo?
I cannot comment.
Okay. All right. We'll just move.
I cannot comment on our secret cameos, but we have several secret cameos.
Great.
That are going to be coming out, and we'll come out with them before the release. So
now I don't want to probe into private conversations, but did any of the actors make it clear that they were pro-choice? You don't have to name names, but they wanted to be part of the story because it's utterly unique. I've seen documentaries on Roe v. Wade. I've read a bunch of books. I've seen documentaries telling the story from a historical angle. It's never been dramatized. As far as I know, there are no film adaptations of the story. So just reaction.
There was a 1989 made-for-TV movie called Roe v. Wade, which I call the Wikipedia version. It was really the Sarah Weddington and Norma Corby story.
I see.
And that was really it. It was all about Sarah and Norma, and and with Holly Hunter, and really this was the Wikipedia, the black and white version, really didn't get into much about. The reason it was made, though, in 1989 was because there was a Supreme Court case called Planned Parenthood v. Casey.
Right.
And the liberals got so nervous that Planned Parenthood v. Casey were going to knock teeth out of Roe, they quickly made a pro-life, pro-choice movie to help influence the media and to influence the courts. Essentially the same thing they did in 1973, leaking fake news, which Bernie did, leak fake news to influence the media to get their decision passed.
And Bernie was very clear in Canada, in my interview with him, that they lied through their teeth. They got really good at lying. Like the stereotype back alley abortion with the coat hanger, and the thousands and thousands of children that will die and these back alley things. He said, we just made it up.
Yeah, he would come out and say 1 million women are having illegal abortions a year, 10,000 dying in back alleys. And they would go and literally go to Newsweek and Time and on clockwork every quarter, work with a reporter there to write a story every quarter on abortion to get their way and to influence the media. That was part of their strategy. They actually outlined a 3-part strategy. One was to influence the media. 2 was to convince the public that life did not begin at conception. And the 3rd part was, they called it their Catholic strategy, and it was to vilify Catholics. So essentially, if Patrick, if you're, I don't know what your religion is, but if they wrote about you in the paper and you were a Catholic, they would say, Patrick, a Catholic, did X, Y, Z. But they would never say, Nick Loeb, a Jew, did X, Y, Z. Right. They would only identify the Catholics as Catholics in newspapers, and that was their Catholic strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just shaming by adjectivizing the person to kind of tag.
And that's, you imagine today, they said, Magic Johnson, a black man, did this. I mean, or Nick Loeb, a Jew, did that. People would lose their minds.
Yeah.
And
Bob Smith, a transgender.
And exactly, they still do this today with religion. They still say, so-and-so a Catholic. You can see it once in a while that the media still vilifies the Catholic. Now, I'm not Catholic, but I find it very interesting.
You must have a lot of support from Catholics. You notice that Catholic vibe.
We got a lot of support from everybody: Catholics, Christians, even Jews, Muslims. And we got a lot of fighting against us from those sides as well. So, even those are divided. We even have pro-choice supporters. I mean, one of our major investors is pro-choice, and some of our actors on set were pro-choice.
Yeah.
You were asking me earlier, Jamie Kennedy, when he came on board, he was pro-choice. He loved the story. He loved the characters. He thought it was factual. He thought the film was balanced. A lot of people think the film's actually balanced. And so, Jamie felt that, and I think Jamie has changed his opinion on the topic after learning so much about it and playing Larry. Corbin Burns is pro-choice. He's a very Christian, very spiritual, loves God, but he has his own personal reasons for being pro-choice. And so you have a divided cast.
Well, the truth has an evidential power to it. If it just needs to be let out of its cage, as happened to Bernie. Just those. Think about how primitive, Nick, fetology images were in the late 70s compared to the 4D imaging we have today. But there's almost like a conspiracy of silence against getting those images out there, because the media love to talk about the gruesome ones, the so-called graphic pictures, but just the pictures of first and second trimester, they're beautiful. The humanity is undeniable, even for atheists.
It is interesting. What's interesting about science is that the left, you always use science as the argument. They wanted to take God out of it. And now we have science on our side, and they don't want to talk about it.
Right.
I find that to be interesting.
What's your goal? What do you hope to
overturn Roe v. Wade?
Overturn Roe v. Wade.
Right.
If Roe v. Wade is overturned, it goes back to the states, and then it becomes sort of a battle at the grassroots level. I wanted to ask you what you thought the relationship between culture and law is, because you can change a law, but if you impose a law that nobody wants, you're going to have constant trouble. is another part of your purpose to win hearts and minds to the position so that the law reflects what voters really want?
Absolutely. And a lot of people have actually, I have a lot of friends of mine, like I said, Jamie, friends who've read the script, people who have actually been working on the movie and editing, that have changed their positions on the topic because I think the number one impact that is impacted is not the conspiracy, not all the fun stuff of how it was decided, but it was a realization that a fetus is a baby. It was a human being. It's a person. Mm-hmm. And that has changed hearts and minds for several people already that have just worked on the movie. And so, yes, if I can just, change one person's opinion who may want to go get an abortion and decide not to, that's one life I saved. And that's worth all the money in the world.
Mm-hmm. Just getting back to the problems and the challenges and the pushback, I always like to say, if you can't fix it, feature it. The fact that you got so much, censorship and problems with Facebook and other social media platforms, when people hear that, they want to, become the cavalry to run to your side.
Listen, it's been great. It's like telling a little baby no. So the more people, or an adult child like me, you tell me no, I can't do it. I just want to run out and do it. No, Nick, you can't make Roe. I mean, I was told by people in Hollywood, Nick, if you do this movie, I'll never speak to you again, or I'm going to destroy your life, or all this stuff.
You'll never have lunch. You'll never eat lunch in this town again.
Right, like the book. So for me, that the worst thing anybody could do to me to get me to stop doing something is tell me not to do it, because it'll just want me to do it even more.
Yeah.
Like a little child. And so all it did was drive me even harder to want to make this movie. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's been great. And even now, we still have to go out and raise, marketing dollars, for the film. Hopefully we'll put together a distribution deal, which we're working on now with a couple of distributors. Mm-hmm. But we need all your listeners to go to RoeVWade.com and support us continually. So we can get over those barriers of Facebook and Twitter and YouTube that have shut us down and blocked us.
You took away one of my arrows in my quiver. How can people connect and donate and get you to the finish line to make this thing launch all over the world? RoeVWade.com?
Yeah, we were very lucky. Like, how did you get the URL? So our original URL was RoeVWadeMovie.com. The gentleman that owned RoeVWade.com we connected with, and very big supporter of what we're doing, and let us borrow the URL through this period.
Great. Well, RoeVWade.com. Can you send me the stop action footage? And also, there was another thing you mentioned, maybe a book. I'll get it. We talked about two things. Okay. I want to make sure that they're in.
Yeah, I'll send you the footage on Twitter. It's amazing.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I say God bless you, Nick Loeb. Thanks for being a gift and for continuing to overcome resistance and obstacles to get this thing out. Any release date set yet?
We're probably the fall 2019. It'll be sometime this year. Not quite yet. We will do our first screening at the NRB convention at the end of March in Anaheim. NRB stands for the National Religious Broadcasters Association.
And are you going to be there?
I will be there.
Okay, great. And I'm just.
Anaheim. Will you be there?
Yeah, I'm in the shadow of Anaheim, near the happiest place in the world. Yeah, Orange County. So maybe,
okay, great.
Maybe we can.
So
see
you know what the NRB. So
yeah, fantastic.
It's in Anaheim this year. I expect all the media to be there. And yeah, we're going to have a screening there, first screening there.
Great, fantastic. Well, go to the show notes at patrickcoffin.media. We'll put links to the footage and the books and the resources that we mentioned on today's interview. Nick, Godspeed, man.
Thank you so much.
I'll circle back. I hope it gets what it deserves. A worldwide audience. So my lips to God's ears. All right, take good care.
Bye-bye.
This is the Patrick Coffin Show. Be a saint. What else is there? Hey, this is Patrick Coffin. If you like what you see and hear and you want to see and hear more, consider joining Coffin Nation as a full member. Just click right here and find out more about what that means. Nipsey, my fedora. That's Coffin Nation, the world's largest online community of culture builders. Click right here. See you on the inside.